Are you thinking about doing your first build to rent property? Or maybe you already started doing build to rents and you're wondering, is there a better way to protect it? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what I would do when it comes to protecting my build to rent asset. All right, let's get started. Okay, so here's the deal. I got this question off my YouTube channel. Somebody wanted to know, hey, if I'm doing a build to rent multi-use property, what would be the best way to protect it? Because of course, I'm concerned that during the construction phase, if somebody was injured, maybe they stepped on a nail, maybe they fell off a beam or something like that and they hurt themselves, but they didn't tell me. And they're just sitting on that pain, dealing with the issue, and then finally it comes up 3 months after the project is done, hey, I really can't perform my job any longer. It happened because of what occurred back on that other prior job. I'm going to bring a lawsuit against the prior owner or the owner of that asset where I was working on. So if that's the concern of yours, which it should be if you're doing any type of construction like this, then what we need to do is develop a strategy around making sure that that type of lawsuit is not going to get to your asset. So what does that look like? Well, it's actually not that complicated to set up this type of structure. What we want to do first off is put the asset itself for the build phase inside of a limited liability company. So I'm going to set up an LLC right here for the build of this property. Now, ideally when you're structuring this type of LLC, since you're not flipping it to another party, where if you've watched my other videos on flipping, you'll know that I talk about the concern of dealer status and you should be using a corporation to flip through to hold the LLC. This isn't one of those scenarios since you're holding on to it. So we have a little more flexibility, actually a lot of flexibility in our tax planning here for these entities. And so what I'm getting at is that when I set up this structure, okay, I'm going to basically treat it like a rental property structure. I'm going to have a Anonymity LLC down here. Okay, so this Wyoming LLC is going to own the Red Box LLC. And the Red Box is where I'm going to do the ground up. Now, once the project is complete, I do not want to leave it inside of this LLC because that person who was on the project, right, this guy here now, and he's saying, oh, I screwed up my leg, and he's sitting in a wheelchair getting around, and he's unhappy, and he found this attorney, and they're coming after me, and they're claiming $750,000 in pain and suffering and loss of consortium, of course, and everything else they can throw at me. Well, what I want to do then is I want to make sure that there isn't an entity that has an asset in it that they can go after. So how do I get to that point? You see, this is the mistake that I've seen people make when they do ground up. They keep the asset in the entity that they built it in. So treat it like you would if you were flipping this asset, except you're flipping it to yourself. So if I was coming in and I wanted to buy this property from you, I would approach you and I would come at you with, hey, I've got an LLC over here, and this LLC that I've set up, it wants to buy this property. Now again, this LLC here would be held by your separate Wyoming LLC that probably holds all of your other rental LLCs. No difference. Use the same one. Again, we're doing it for anonymity purposes. So now I'm going to sell this property here to this LLC. Now, when I sell it to the limited liability company, I'm about to show you a technique that is going to give you added asset protection going forwards. Okay, so stick with me on this and understand this is not just to get it out of this LLC, but it's going to give you further asset protection down the line should something happen with any of your renters inside of that. So we're going to sell it to the LLC, and when I sell it to this LLC, I'm going to sell it on an installment sale. Okay. And when I sell it on the installment sale, what I'm going to do is transfer title to this LLC. Then I'm going to take back a promissory note. Now, of course, understand this assumes that after you've built it up, that you do not have debt on the property. If you do have debt on the property, you can still do this strategy, but you have to make sure that you will not violate your loan. Okay, you have to look at your loan agreement to make sure that this strategy here I'm about to share with you does not violate that. So I'm going to transfer it over. I'm going to sell it on an installment sale. An installment sale means that I'm not coming up with any money up front. I'm just going to finance it over time. And I have this promissory note here that's going to be owned by this LLC. And this LLC now, with that promissory note, is going to take back a deed of trust against the property. So it's going to encumber that asset for the purchase price, right? So what it bought it for, or what it sold it for. Now, this LLC is just holding on to a note at this point in time. This LLC holds the property. So now the property's over there. It's encumbered by a note. I don't know. Let's say that note was $1 million. All right, is what you sold it for. So I've got $1 million obligation recorded against that property, and it was sold via an installment sale, and I took back a note. Now, do I leave things as is? No, I do not. Because if I leave that note in there, then this creditor here could go and take my note. So I've just swapped this. I swapped property for an intangible asset, the promissory note. So I went from real property to intangible property. Heck, a creditor would probably want the promissory note because then you would have to pay your creditor every month interest and principal on that note. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take that note and I'm going to distribute it to this Wyoming LLC right here. And then I'm going to shut this whole structure down. So I'm going to dissolve out that red box, and I'm going to have the note now owned by my Wyoming LLC. So here's where the note is. And so now we have an obligation that no longer runs to the red box. That obligation in the deed of trust now runs to the blue box. Now, if you're trying to wrap your head around this strategy and think about it, how does this actually work? Here's a real easy way, I think, to understand this. When you took out a mortgage on your personal residence, right? You took it out with a broker. Let's say it was Acme Funding. Well, Acme Funding 2 years down the road may no longer hold your note, right? They sold your note to Freddie or Fannie. So Freddie or Fannie is now the holder of that promissory note. Many times you don't know this because you're working through a loan service processor that collects all the payments on a monthly basis, but the actual holder of the note is Freddie or Fannie. So what Acme did is they entered into an assignment, because you'll notice that when you entered into that agreement, that loan agreement, it was assignable by the lender. Acme just assigned it over to the third party. Now you're going to assign your note to your Wyoming LLC, and that's called a distribution. That's why setting these up from a tax standpoint is really important. You get this right and you don't screw it up, because you could create a taxable event for yourself if you did it the wrong way. So now we're going to assign the note over so the Wyoming LLC owns it. And at the same time, we're going to do the same thing with the deed of trust. So we change the beneficiary under that deed of trust over here to this Wyoming LLC. So it's the one that owns the payments. Now I'm sitting in a position here where this limited liability company, let's say the payments on this note every month they have to pay over is $8,000 a month. Well, if I'm bringing in rental income of $12K, then I'm going to pay $8K to this LLC. Okay, is there a problem there? This is all a wash, right? Instead of taking money down through here to myself, I'm taking $4K down through here, and I'm pulling $8K out of this LLC. It's still me. I'm still on both sides of the transaction. But the benefit is by doing it this way. It's a little more paperwork, a few more steps, but there's a lot more protection here. Because if something were to happen over here, and someone's looking to bring a cause of action and sue this LLC, they're going to be faced with the reality that there's no equity in this property. There's very little equity in the property. So what do you want to do? Do you want to negotiate with that insurance company and try to get as much as you can out of the policy? Or do you want to spend a gob ton of money fighting this LLC to get a judgment that you'll never collect on because it does not have the equity to pay off the judgment? Most attorneys in that situation would choose to just negotiate and get as much as they can out of the policy. That's what this strategy is designed to do, make them go away. So you end up having this one LLC that holds on to the note. And if you want to do this again, set the same structure up and do it again. Set up a new red box, distribute the note down. So eventually you'll have maybe one LLC in your structure that's a note holding entity and it's receiving all these payments from your various other structures. Now, before you start throwing a lot of tax questions into the notes down below, comments, understand this. This is pretty much tax neutral to you to go through this, okay? Because on one hand, you're paying yourself interest, and the other hand, you're deducting it, so it's going to net each other out. So for those of you that get hung up on the tax side, don't. It's if you sold this building to your spouse, right? If you sold it to your spouse, your spouse and you file a joint return, you're not going to have a taxable recognition here when you buy it from yourself. The code just doesn't work that way. So from a tax side, it's clean. From an asset protection side, it's really dirty for someone else that's coming after you because they can't get after the assets. Guys, if you like this video, be sure to smash on the like button. And if you're not yet a subscriber, hey, let's help drive the growth of the channel. Subscribe now. And be sure to send it out to your friends and say, hey, there's a guy here on the internet that might know something about asset protection when it comes to real estate investing. Take care.